I want to make sure, though, that I ask you about ducks. I understand that the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation is heavily involved in the North American Waterfowl Management Plan. Can you tell me how the Federation is involved and its relationship to the North American?
Yes. I'll go back a little bit farther, Wilf. Our Heritage Marsh program was started up back in 1980 sometime. We recognized that waterfowl were under great duress and disappearing, particularly the wetlands, in a great hurry. So we put together, and it has been traditional for the Federation to do cooperative programs with government, with Ducks Unlimited, with Wildlife Habitat Canada, even with the Natural History Society. So we put together a Heritage Marsh program to develop the major marshes in Saskatchewan with the agreement with government that we would buy the lure crops and put in feeding stations on those to protect the landowner from crop depredation. Because we really had the basics and the groundwork done by the time the North American Waterfowl Management Program came along, we got a 2-year head start on that program with the First Step project up in Quill Lakes.
Quill Lakes, right.
That's right. One of the areas we had chosen as a heritage marsh. The North American Waterfowl Management Plan now is a major, and it surprised me, a major agricultural program.
Yes.
And as an agrologist, you probably recognize that. We are finding ways to help the landowner do better things on his land that helps wildlife at the same time.
Promote soil conservation, wise forage management, that kind of thing.
Chem fallow.
Yes.
If somebody had told me 10 years ago that the Wildlife Federation would have been involved in chem fallow, I'd have said they were nuts. But helping the farmer get involved in these programs that he hasn't been able to afford before is just going to do marvelous things for all species of waterfowl, not simply for waterfowl.
So where are we then in terms of implementing the North American Waterfowl Management Plan in Saskatchewan, and where does the Federation fit? What are some of the things the Federation does on the land?
We have accepted the responsibility for holding title to the land. First of all of the agencies associated with the North American wanted that land held not by government, where it may be in danger of some political decisions being made, but in somebody that's got a track record in land management as well. So the Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation, because we have the ability to protect that land politically, was chosen to hold title to those lands. So all the lands that are purchased or leased under the North American Waterfowl Management Plan will reside in our name with caveats by the other agencies. We've also accepted responsibility for the nest basket program. We've installed 1,500 of those up in the Quill Lakes in the last 2 years. They were refurbished again this spring.
How successful have they really been in having ducks come in and nest?
It's going to be a little slow while our mallards learn to use them. But the interesting thing is that once they do use them, and I think the use starts to grow somewhere around 5 or 10% and gradually escalates as they learn what the nest baskets are about. But the interesting thing about the basket is that when it's used, the success rate is 100%.
That's because of the location, the physical location of the nest basket?
The fact that predators can't get at them.
Predators can't get at them.
They're over water. We're finding in some of our test areas, particularly around the quills, that 90% of that hatch is lost to predators before it gets to the water.
That's interesting.
Can't raise waterfowl like that.
I have one final question just before we close off here, and that is the role of the Wildlife Federation as a lobby group. Just very quickly, and I see we're almost out of time, but can you give me an idea or a feel for the lobby effectiveness of Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation?
We view ourselves as a support group for good government legislation. I put that good in quotes because we've been known to take them all to court at one time or another for for anything that has to do with mismanagement of the wildlife resource or its habitat. We have worked cooperatively through both the Wildlife Development Fund, the Fisheries Enhancement Fund, and the Critical Wildlife Habitat, which has put some 1.4 million acres of critical wildlife habitat on Crown land under legislation so that it's protected.
That's been very interesting, Ed. I think we have some slides to look at, too.
Yes.
Now, Ed, I understand this is a very interesting slide. I understand there's a special story about these two individuals.
Very, very special people, Wilf. That's Mr. and Mrs. Pearson, who have donated, and I believe it's a half a section of their land, which is all of their land. They're going to live on it as long as they need it, and it'll then be set aside exclusively for wildlife. It's a pure donation to the Habitat Trust Fund.
Whereabouts in Saskatchewan, roughly?
It's in central Saskatchewan, and I forget the community that it's close to. My land coordinator brought that arrangement in with those people.
Oh, that's excellent. It's really good to see that there are people this dedicated to wildlife and willing to make that kind of sacrifice.
Certainly are.
Ed, we have a shot here that looks like it's some kind of interesting habitat. I see some wolf willow in the foreground. What can you tell us about this area?
I'm not positive about that slide, Wilf. It might be Strawberry Lake, although those evergreens are tipping me off a little bit. I'm not sure where that is, but it's the kind of habitat. It's probably a land donation along the South Saskatchewan River that was given to us by some people up there, and I think that was a half a section donated.
Looks good. This is the kind of habitat wildlife needs.
This is a slide from our outdoor conservation camp. Every year we take 20 boys, 22 boys and 22 girls at different times up into northern Saskatchewan. Right there they will be at Candle Lake. They'll be there for 3 days, and they've got to provide all of their own housing, catch their own food. It's a survival training course for young people, and they really enjoy it.
And this is called the
Outdoor Conservation Camp.
Outdoor Conservation Camp, and it's held every year?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. This is a setup from our Moose Jaw branch. They're planting trees here, trees in the hedgerows. They've built their own tree planter. They borrow a tractor from somebody. They got the spray tank on behind, and they'll run in miles and miles and miles of trees with that unit.
And this is kind of a habitat enhancement program too?
Yes, it is. It's a branch project. I think that'll be on the Chamberlain land. Just a terrific job they're doing.
Designed to stabilize soil, provide food, that kind of thing?
Very much so. Yes, there they're at it again.
And it looks like there are several people taking part. How are the turnouts for these kinds of activities among the various regional groups?
We usually end up with more people than we need, and then we have to feed them in the evening. But it's a great program. Yes, that is the Chamberlain land.
And it looks like this is a shot of the conservation school.
This is back in the conservation school. I suspect there is a biologist in there training those kids, teaching them something about browse, how high it grows, where you'll find it, and what it's good for.
Typically, how many kids would show up at a camp?
We can fill those camps. We could probably fill them 4 times a year. Finding instructors is the problem. We put on one camp for 1 week for about 24 boys, and then the next week for 24 girls.
Sounds good. What is the cost for an individual?
Does not cost the individuals anything. The branch picks up a cost of $150 per student for it to cover our expenses.
So if one of our listeners wanted to send one of their children on the course, how would they get in contact with the people in charge?
Contact the local branch of the Wildlife Federation in your community, early in the year, very early in the year, or late in the year after.
There's a lot of demand for the school.
There is, very much so.
Good.
They're getting ready to get a ride, and I believe that was from NORCAN when they were functioning up there, and they'll be taking a look at our northern forests from the air.
And this is part of the conservation school too?
Yes, it is. They're telling some stories. This will be back at base camp. They've got permanent tents set up there now. They will have been given lessons on fisheries biology, wildlife biology, forestry, even sewage management. We take them out through marshes and show them what waterfowl look like.
That sounds very interesting too. I'll bet a lot of city kids would enjoy this kind of program.
They certainly do. They're putting up their tents for the night as well.
It looks like this one fellow has learned to adapt to the black fly and the mosquito.
I think if you look a little closer, you'll find that's the girls' camp.
Looks good. So girls are involved, girls are invited on these programs
as
well.
Yep.
Is there any difference in the number of girls or the number of boys, or do you find interest is roughly the same between the two groups?
Very much the same. The girls tend to be a tad easier to manage, a tad more interested, and it's nice to take them up there.
Is there an age limitation on the kids that can qualify for the camp?
16, I believe, is the
top end.
Is the top end.
Looks like a bit of survival training going on in this slide too.
Yep, wherever they're going to sleep tonight, they're going to have to build it.
This is great training, almost like Boy Scouts in
Very much so.
Now, I see this slide outlines the number of heritage marshes located in the province. Have you got a couple of comments on each marsh?
That's the first one, the first 5 selected. Shea Lake is up just north of Prince Albert. Ponus Lake, of course, is a very famous marsh around Saskatchewan that we've put into the Heritage Marsh program. Foam Lake is just an absolutely beautiful situation. Thunder Creek Marshes, we have worked basically on Pelican Lake there. That's being rolled into the North American now and will include all of the Thunder Creek drainage, all the way from Diefenbaker just about down to Moose Jaw. Chaplain Marsh is a very, very interesting marsh. The water on its way to the salt plant at Chaplain is captured and held there for a while and raises a great very many waterfowl. Great spot in Saskatchewan for piping plover as well.
This has obviously been a successful program.
Yes, very much so.